Well, here we are again. And probably you are thinking, what next? Which other episode does this whole series have for us? Before you start thinking and probably assuming, let me help you. You've seen how important it is to always try and reconnect with history to understand current events, especially as we try to decipher important things within the biblical records. And in this new episode, there are two very clearly distinguished people within the context of the Joshua accounts which need to be recognized. And they are, well, let me save their names. In the mid 1930s, Europe wanted peace, and many of us who have had the privilege to go through the annals of history as far as the European continent is concerned can really see that a time ago, especially in the 20th century, there were a lot of wars. But as already stated, in the 1930s, Europe wanted peace and at any price. That is because previously, from 1914 to 1919, there had been the First World War. And unfortunately, it appears the League of Nations was failing, even though it was promising at the start. World War I was still fresh in memory, and most leaders desperately believed that if they simply ignored the giants, they would go away. Well, one man saw what others refused to see, and we'll see the name soon. Clearly, in the annals of history, especially within the United Kingdom, or precisely England, while Parliament celebrated peace treaties and shook hands with dictators, one man called Winston Churchill warned, and these were his words: "The storm is coming. Britain must prepare." After saying this, he was mocked, he was ridiculed, he was called paranoid. In fact, he was called old-fashioned, alarmist, and he was termed an enemy of peace. But one thing stands out in the resolution of Churchill. He had read the intelligence reports. He had observed military movements. He saw the rise of Nazi power and the danger it posed. Unfortunately, where others saw an unconquerable giant, Churchill saw a threat that could be defeated if faced early. Well, he stood almost alone. And this reminds me of a very important character, at least the first of the two I have to discuss, who spoke boldly even when the crowd wanted to silence him. The Bible is clear that Caleb lived enough to see his faith vindicated. Churchill, of course, lived to see the very danger he warned Britain about, and the victory that followed when the nation finally acted. And what is the point? The point is this, and as we will discover, courageous faith often looks like madness until time reveals its wisdom. Minority conviction, as we would see, is often more accurate than majority fear. And more importantly, spiritual eyesight sees what natural eyesight denies. Now, with that in your mind, let's step into ancient Canaan, where an 85-year-old warrior looks at giants and says, "Give me this mountain." Welcome to Steady Insights. The name Caleb, or as people would also say, Caleb, means a dog. Whoa, a dog? Is it the usual dogs that we know? Well, it is very important to understand that his life demonstrated the real meaning of what this dog is. He didn't receive that name as a derogatory term, no, but because of his unwavering loyalty. He was faithful where others were unfaithful, and he remained loyal to God where others flinched. If you remember, probably from the accounts of the Exodus, even through the 40 years of wilderness, just before Israel saw the demise of Moses, 10 spies were sent to survey the land. And these 10 spies saw cities impossible to conquer and giants impossible to overcome. Caleb, or Caleb, saw cities conquered and giants eaten like a bread. You can cross refer from Numbers 13, verse 28 through 33. Clearly, together with Joshua, who was, well, younger than him, he stood firm in his opinion, even when the crowd wanted to stone them. Could you believe this? Because of lack of faith, the people of Israel were ready to stone those who stood by their conviction. And the example of Caleb encourages us to maintain our firm faith in the resolution we have in God. And He is the only one who can make possible what is impossible. According to Caleb himself, when Moses asked for an account, he said, I brought him back a report according to my convictions, and I followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. Joshua 14, verse 7 and 8. Because of his faithfulness, he was promised that he would inherit the place where his feet had set foot during the inspection. For your record, Caleb was 40 years old when he was sent as a spy. After 5 years of conquest, he was now an old man of 85. His body and mind were still as vigorous, and his thoughts were still the same. But the time had come to claim the promise and prove that his words were not in vain. And with God's help, he was going to devour the giants and conquer their cities. These are some of the reasons why many people who dwell in Gaza, in the land of Palestine, argue that the people of Israel currently, remember I'm not referring to the biblical Israel now, the people who call themselves Israel now, who became a sovereign state in the 1940s, are being argued to have conquered the land that is not theirs. Well, it is not my aim to link current Israel to the biblical Israel. But importantly for our discussion, it appears that Caleb was very convicted that he could defeat the people who dwelt in Canaan when Israel entered the land. He had proven that God could be trusted. Now he wanted to find someone who had the same faith so he could pass the torch to them. And that is why, for this reason, he promised his daughter's hand to the one who conquered Kiriath Sefer, also called Debir. The Bible is very clear that his nephew Othniel was the mighty man who conquered the city and became the first judge of Israel. Friends, if we are able to clearly follow what is being discussed, like Churchill, Caleb stood firm when others collapsed. Like Churchill, or even Churchill, like Caleb, saw victory long before anyone else believed it. And of course, like Churchill, Caleb's conviction did not die with him. He passed it on. More importantly, another very distinguished contestant in this discussion is Joshua. In fact, he has been the main center of attraction in all of this discourse, aside God, Moses, and Israel. As a young man, Joshua was chosen by Moses as his assistant. He proved to be obedient, courageous, faithful, helpful, and a lover of the things of God. When the time came to claim his own territory, he waited until all the tribes had obtained their inheritance. And it will surprise you, he chose the portion left over, a city near Shiloh, where the sanctuary had been erected. Now, these are some of the lessons we really learn from the life of Joshua. Number one, we see that faith does not ignore the facts. Remember, it is important for us to understand that whatever it is, when we believe in God, it doesn't demean the importance of facts. It simply offers a different angle of understanding. Again, instead of complaining, we are called to trust and submit to God's plans. Then, as a consequence of that, blessings come to those who remain totally in the Lord. More importantly, life in all its dimensions must be lived according to the plans established by God. And finally, it is worth living close to God. Joshua and Caleb were two men, but they carried the faith of an entire nation. They were minority voices. You may tell yourself, I'm the minority, but these two shaped the destiny of the majority. It is very important for us not to miss the point. After all this discourse concerning how to obtain faith, and clearly the biblical record invites us to observe the example of the great heroes of faith, with special attention, of course, to the author and the finisher of our faith, the supreme example, Christ. By studying the lives of people of faith like Caleb and Joshua, we learn to trust God as they did, to be humble as they were, and to bear witness to the truth with courage as they did. But the question is, how can we be transformed? Well, fortunately for us, the answer is provided, allowing the Spirit of God to work in us. This is an active work. We must choose to be transformed and, like Caleb, get to work. We are called to be living sacrifices. Remember, faith is not inherited, it is imitated. Faith is not automatic, it is cultivated. And faith is not passive, it is active. Churchill stood, Caleb stood, Joshua stood. The question is, will we stand?